Hey everybody, Tim here, host of the I'll Talk If You'll Listen podcast, and I have a special treat for you. So, a couple of episodes ago, you may have heard me spoke about COVID-19 and how it's still a real thing and how we all are going about reacting to it and responding to it in different ways. And I had the unique opportunity to get in touch with a friend of mine who actually had COVID-19. So this was definitely an important point for both he and I to get together to talk about this. So I wanted to upload this to the YouTube channel. I may be putting this other places too, like, Instagram and Facebook. And I wanted to upload this entire interview. Sorry, there's no video. However, there is some really powerful audio here. So sit back, enjoy this snippet, this extra episode, this extra unscheduled event of I'll Talk If You'll Listen. I'll see you on the other side.
Hey everybody, this is a special edition of I'll Talk If You'll Listen. This time we have a exclusive interview, one that I couldn't pass up, with a friend of mine and someone who has recently had a traumatic experience with COVID-19. Right now we have Brian. Brian, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, what's going on, Tim, man? First of all, thank you so much for having me. I've been a big fan of your show for the longest time.
Oh, that warms my heart to hear you say from the GOAT himself, Mr. Five Podcast himself. You humble me, sir. You've been in the game for quite some time. Your YouTube channel, one of the YouTube channels, the Nerd Coalition, has over 13,000 subscribers. So, hey, I think you're doing quite all right yourself.
Well, thank you.
No problem, man. And the reason I couldn't pass up on this opportunity is I don't know anyone personally who has had COVID-19 or the latest strain of the coronavirus, and everyone, it's always been through a friend of a friend. And you always hear these stories, hey, this person, they have it and now they're okay, or hey, they have it and now they're not. But you don't really hear about the inner workings of it. So I just wanted to get the opportunity to talk to someone who personally had it and just walk everybody listening through the experience. So let's start with this. When did you find out that you actually had COVID-19?
Well, I'm a caretaker, so when I went to go check on my father, and he was sick, and we was already concerned, like he was really sick. So that was on April 19th when he was truly sick, and I came home, and I took all my clothes off, and I made sure I took a shower to take my vitamin C, so whatever I needed to do. But then the next day, on April 20th, I went out, and I was still in my car, and I was like, I just feel a little weak. And then so I came back home, and I laid down, and then I woke up with a fever. So that's how I knew. I was like, okay, I'm like, I feel as though I'm sick, but I don't know if it's COVID just yet, because when I get sick, I usually catch fevers anyway. Then when my father went to have an appointment on Tuesday, with that Tuesday, which was 4/21, and then he got his results back saying that he was tested positive for COVID-19, and we found it out on like a Thursday.
Wow.
So I was already sick already, but then that's when we found out that officially it was COVID-19.
Wow. Now I'm sure that was interesting for you, because I'm sure you've gotten sick in the past. I'm sure you had fevers in the past. I'm sure you had headaches in the past. So what about this time around did, you get a feeling like, what, this seems a little bit different? What about it specifically made you think like, what, let me go back home?
Okay, so it was because of how fatigued I got. I've had fevers, and I said I've worked through them before. I've had crystal pneumonia before. I've had the flu before. So when it was very, very fatigued, I just got tired, like very, very tired, to the point where it was like when you're so tired, you've been up for 24 hours, you can't even keep your eyes open anymore. It was tired to the point where it was just like, it's hard for me to walk up these stairs. It's hard for
Wow.
me to walk down this hallway. It's hard for me to do simple everything things that I know my body is strong enough to do. So with that
Mm.
being said, when I was walking up the stairs, I was like, this is harder than usual. It was real harder than usual. Then
Mm-hmm.
when I got to bed, it felt like I just sunk down into it. And that's when I realized, I was like, this is something different.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I can imagine how maybe scary that would have been for you. Throughout that whole process, once you actually was diagnosed with the COVID-19, you knew like, okay, hey, I have COVID-19. Throughout that whole process, did you have a sense of encouragement? Like, hey, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to get through this. I know I can beat this just like I beat everything else in my life. Or was it a sense of like, everything that we hear in the news and the media is just like COVID-19 is a death sentence. Once you get it, you're done. Did you have kind of a grim outlook like, man, this is it? Or was it more positive like, hey, I'm going to beat this thing?
Well, it was actually a little bit of both. The thing is, when I first got it, you have the initial fear. But when I had it, I am a man based on faith. So I am a guy that was just like, okay, I have it now. There's no point in crying and complaining about it, like why me, blah 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 blah. It's now, how can I beat it? Because the number one breakdown thing of the immune system is stress. And when you have sicknesses, whether it be COVID-19 or not, when you have the stress of the sickness, that's what helps kill you faster than the actual sickness itself. So if you don't get your mind, if you don't get your mind right, then your immune system is going to break down and it has no defense against the sickness. That's why usually certain doctors are not allowed to tell you that you may have 3 months to live, because usually it's an estimate that they may not know yet. Like, and they did that to my grandmother last year, and she was on hospice care in July, but then she was on hospice care through the whole thing, and now they had to take her off before she actually did that. So there really is no guarantee. So I had the mindset of that I'm going to beat this thing. And then my wife, on the other hand, was the one that was more of the fearful side, because
Of
she
course,
caught it
of
too.
course. Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that can be something that could rock the foundation of anyone's faith, of anyone's family, of anyone's function. It could definitely throw a curveball when you're expecting that fastball. But I mean, here you are. You're on the other side of it. You and your wife, you're fine, relatively speaking, and everything seems to be okay. Now, I think what a lot of people, whenever they get sick, whether it be COVID, whether it be cancer, whether it be a normal cold, they come out on the other side of it and go, they have a greater appreciation, and they're like, hey, this is smooth sailing now. Do you live your life without fear now after you got through COVID? Are you more like, hey, I can tackle anything right now? Or did COVID kind of shake you a little bit and you're more cautious now than you were going into it?
That's actually a good question, because honestly, I used to live my life like that without fear years ago. And then COVID wasn't the one that woke me up. It was a death of a friend of mine that happened. Because I was always in the mindset that if I do the right things, and to say the right things, and I'm almost kind of invincible. And then when such a good person was gunned down, I realized that, life doesn't discriminate. America might, but life doesn't. So,
How about that?
Yeah. So with that, it humbled me to knowing that no matter what's going on out in this world, it can happen to me just as it can happen to anybody else. So when COVID happened, it was a thing where, okay, after I had beat COVID, because the biggest thing that helped me beat COVID was my kids. Because my kids had to evacuate the house when I had it. And I didn't see them for a month.
Wow, man. I'm sure that was probably the hardest part.
Yeah, so when you sit there and you wake up every day, and then you're scared to go to sleep, you're sitting there thinking like, okay, I got to get well because my daughter, who's not even 1 year, I mean, she's one now, but when I had it, she wasn't 1 yet because her birthday is in May. And I was like, she's so close. I'm going to see her when, her turn 1 year old. And then my son, who's about to go into 5th grade, I'm like, I'm going to see this. So I had a determination level. So now, life after COVID, I am still very aware. I'm still very cautious because, I'm not invincible because you can get tested positive for this thing again. And there's still so many things that people don't understand about the disease, about the virus and things like that. Then there's false information. Then there's people out there scaring everybody. Then you have the people who think it's a hoax, which it's not. And I'm always on my because I'm always more aware now, but I'm also more aware of how to take care of myself also.
I think that's the best approach to take. I think you're right. It's one thing to listen to the experts, but see, back in the day, there was always a delayed response. There wasn't, as soon as they found something out, we got it right away. Newspapers had to be printed. You didn't get it the next day. Maybe it would have been on the news that night, but you didn't know. Now, instantly, as soon as the CDC comes up with something, as soon as the White House or the World Health Organization comes up with something, we can have access to it in minutes via social media. And I think that's both a good and bad thing, depending on the context. And I think your approach is the best way to go. Just be careful, just be safe, stay informed, and stay informed to the point where you're able to discern what's fake, what's not accurate, and what is grounded in science and research. And I think that's the best thing we can do, whether you believe in the numbers or whether you believe in the content that's out there. Washing your hands won't help or won't hurt. Whether you believe in the situation or not, wearing a mask won't hurt. Whether you believe in the situation or not, being socially distant won't hurt. And I think as long as we take a look at these things, that regardless of what our disposition on the virus is, as long as we take these proven or at least recommended steps, it won't hurt the situation. It may not help, but it definitely won't hurt the situation. And, I think you, Brian, is this the reason I feel like this will be refreshing and encouraging for everyone to hear is that first and foremost, COVID-19 is not a death sentence. You can get through it. Whatever vehicle you use to get through it, whether that be, health, whether it be faith, whether it be determination, sheer will, whatever it is possible. You can get through it. But on the flip side, it's a very real thing. Here I am on the phone with someone who actually had it, whose wife actually had it. This isn't made up. This isn't a Disney movie. This is something that can happen and is very, very real. The last bit of advice that I want to get from you, Brian, we got an opportunity, even if only one person hears this episode or we get 50 or 100. Right now we have the opportunity to educate and give some advice. What advice would you give to people out there living in fear? And what advice would you give to people out there living carefree as if this thing doesn't exist?
Well, a couple of things. I've actually told my pastor that the same thing you just said, and he used it at his church, that COVID-19 is a very serious virus, but it's not a death sentence. You can make it past this. And I will say that, if you're out there living in fear, you can't, as much as, it is a scary thing, you can't live your life in fear because right now, the media's job out there is to make people aware, but also to, when people like to hear, to not suppress people. And I'm not saying suppress to the form of, we're going to rebel against that because it's hard to make a group of people listen to something where you don't know how serious it is. Because with me having kids, that's how you got to, discipline your kids sometimes. Sometimes you got to make the situation seem a little bit bad in order to get them in check because there are people out here who don't take this virus seriously. And sometimes just a tactic to get a collective group of people. If people keep hearing that, this number is going up by this number, and every day we're getting a new number, they have to put it to you like that so you can realize that you got to put your mask on. You got to go out there and be healthy. But if you do your research, those numbers are from weeks ago, so it's adding on. I had to do my research too, for my right frame of mind. But you need to go out there and you have to pay close attention because it's something so simple. It's like something that not just to protect you, but to protect your loved ones and your friends and all that also. A lot of people, don't like to wear these masks and don't want to put on the gloves, and they keep thinking it's a hoax. I'm like this. There are asymptomatic people out there. And for those who don't know what that means, is people can catch this virus and not show no symptoms. That means they're carriers. That means they spread it. The virus puts a host, and then they spread it.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even know that they're spreading it. And into somebody who is at high risk gets this virus, and there's something serious can happen to them, like death, or like what happened to my father. My father then got quarantined for a month because he was sick for that long because he's 70 years old. Mm-hmm. So with all that being said, for the ones that are out there scared, it's not a death sentence. You know what I'm saying? People are going to die because, people are careless. And that is the unfortunate thing about it. But however, the numbers, what I'm saying, it's a very high recovery rate. We don't know what the long-term effects are. There are some people that have more long-term effects than others. It's like picture COVID-19 as a tornado in your body. You know what I'm saying? You're living in middle America, and when that tornado touches down, it, ransacks, the whole neighborhood. There's nothing but trash and stuff left in its way, and you got to fix it back up. But you can still make it, but you still got to fix that neighborhood back up again. That's what COVID is like going through the body. Now, for the people out there who they believe it's a hoax, or or don't have, they don't have too much fear in it, you really need to check yourself. There's no other polite way to put it other than you need to take yourself seriously because it ain't about you all the time. And a lot of times when people, are rebelling against this mask wearing or social distancing, it's always about, I can't go out. I'm in a house with 2 kids. You think I don't want to go outside? You think I don't want to escape? I'm a married man. I have to get away from my wife sometimes. And she'll tell you the same thing. Okay? So, what I'm saying? And I'm a married man with 2 kids. I got to get out the house. Trust me. You're not the only one in this bubble. And when you think like that, you become selfish. And when you're selfish, you're thinking of oneself. That is the problem. It's not about you. And then next thing you know, if you catch this virus because you don't want to go to the beach or you don't want to wear your face mask and you come back and you transfer that virus to your kids, your grandmother, a friend of yours who may be at high risk, and then next thing you know, they have to go to the hospital, that's on you. Because you didn't take the necessary precautions. That's what the problem is about. It's a selfish act to even think like that. And it's not always just about you. If you want to go out there and live recklessly and you want to come back and quarantine in your own house for 14 days, that's on you. I can't tell a person what to do, especially not an adult. But if that adult is going to come near me or that adult is going to come near any of my high-risk family members or my high-risk friends, people understand, especially with this second surge that is becoming regular, the numbers are younger people. Because they're frustrated and they want to get out the house, and you've been hearing people getting sick and dying at our age, in our 30s, now even our 20s. Because when you're young, I know when I was, there was no going to the doctor to see if I had high risk of anything. Asthma is not high risk. People may think it's not high risk, but it is. Because that's what this disease attacks. It's a respiratory thing. It will attack that if you have that. People are overweight So if you have heart issues, it'll attack that. If you have diabetes, we as Americans have a terrible diet regardless. So people may walk around here with diabetes and not even know it. It attacks that. It attacks all those things, and then by the time you get too sick, sometimes it can be too late. And that's a very selfish act. And then you sit there and you think to yourself, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have gone to that party. Or maybe I should have worn my face mask. But see, it's too late. It's really too late. If you have that vigilant mind that you don't want to listen or you don't want to take the thing seriously, well, I don't need your vigilant acts around me or any good with people that you care about. I will never tell you, I will never keep you in bondage and tell you what you have to do. But when it comes to this, I will say that you will have to stay away from me and my family or anybody else that is at high risk, or anybody else who actually does care. At least give that respect. If you don't care about yourself or you don't care about people that's around you because they don't care, that collective group, then that collective group needs to stay together on its own terms. But don't bring around the people who do care.
That's a really good way to put it, man. You know, some people only think about how, whatever the situation, how it may impact themselves and how it may not impact the few people around them. Now, what I will say is sometimes it can be really difficult to think about people outside of a certain radius, whether that be, for some people, it's just their house. For other people, it's just their neighborhood. For other people, it's just their zip code, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for some people, it's easier said than done. But I think one thing that you said that most sane people can agree on is that it's not just about one person. It's not just about me. It's not just about you. It's about the world at this point. And more importantly, the next generation, you know, our kids.
Yes.
You know, we need to make sure that they have a world to grow up in. We don't want them being homeschooled forever, going to school in altered conditions that isn't necessarily ideal for their learning and their education. So, Brian, I think this was great. I think this was very educational, and I think that this will serve as a healthy, hopefully friendly reminder to some that, hey, this is a really real thing. This isn't just made up. And on the flip side, I hope it lets everyone who is wrapping themselves up in plastic and not leaving their bed and they're in this plastic cocoon, like, hey, you don't have to go to that extreme.
You don't
have to. You can go outside as long as you're careful, as long as you're safe. And sometimes even when you're careful and when you're safe, you can still catch something, and that's not your fault. You know, that's not your fault. There's certain scenarios where it can be your fault. If you're walking around with no mask with your mouth open, yodeling, then yeah, maybe it is your fault that you caught something, but you can be perfectly safe and still catch something. There's no right way to handle certain situations, but there are definitely wrong ways. So again, Brian, I really appreciate you taking a slice out of your time. I know you're a busy man, you're a family man. We talked offline and you had to make some arrangements to make this interview happen. So I really appreciate the time and the energy that you brought. And before I let you go, do you have anything going on that you want to let the people know about?
Yes, I do have things going on. First of all, we over here at Nerd Coalition, our website is launched, so make sure you guys go check out therealnerdcoalition.com, where you guys can go in there and find all things Nerd Coalition, from the things we do, from our Fat Reacts to our Level Up gameplays, and we have Nerd Coalition merch up there as well. So for Nerd Coalition t-shirt, we have our new Shazam logo, then we have our retro logo and some of our podcast stuff like that. And speaking of podcasts, we do 5 coming onto a new produced 6 podcasts. So if you guys are into wrestling at all, make sure you check out the No Gimmicks Needed Wrestling podcast. We talk all wrestling on there, not just WWE, all kinds of wrestling from all over the globe. Then we have a pop culture podcast, which is the Nerdgasm Talk podcast, which we talked about not a little bit of pop culture, movies, games, geek culture is what that podcast is about, video games and all that kind of stuff like that. then if you're into hip hop and the hip hop culture and what's going on in that world, my wife has her podcast, Turntables, Hip Hop Culture and Beyond. You guys can check that out for all the hip hop heads out there. And then if you guys are more on a serious tip and want to get into politics, or if you want to get into, just personal things like what my man Tim does on his podcast, you can check out Drunk Thoughts, Sober Tongues, podcast that we do that's hosted by my man Left Brain. And then we have, I have a Ballers Lounge podcast, which is a sports podcast where we talk about all things sports. There's a lot of things going on in the world of sports. And my newest one that we're producing right now is actually one that I was waiting to, for this interview to personally invite you on. It's our Man Talk podcast, which is
wow. Okay.
Yeah, an all man. This thing has been in production for over a year. And I told them, I told all my friends, I said, when this thing gets launched, I got 3 guests in mind that's coming on my show when it first launches, and your name is on that list because I'm such a big fan of the I'll Talk You Listen podcast, especially when it was at launch. And I said, I have so many topics. It's going to be a uncut, way for men to express themselves because a lot of times, men are really closed off and shut off, and I feel as though this is therapeutic for certain men who aren't able to talk to certain people or who aren't able to express their feelings. It's going to, it's a no judgment zone, kind of like Planet Fitness. It's a no judgment zone where men can come out and and we talk about different topics, whether it just be about, racism or things that we deal with, or even God, or even, saying that just things that we deal with in our life that usually that we don't even talk about. So that podcast is in close production to almost being finished until we actually, get out and start. And I would love to have you on some of those podcasts. I waited till we did the recording to personally tell you that.
Wow, man. Well, world exclusive, folks. You heard it here first. I'm honored that you waited for the show to debut that 6th show. And yes, you got my yes now. You got my yes in the future. You got my yes forever. 100%. Just give me the details offline. And I'm really excited to be a part of your creator journey because, like I said, you're the GOAT. It's your world. I'm just a squirrel, But with that said, I know you're a busy man, Brian. I really appreciate you coming on to the show, and hopefully we can do this in the future.
Absolutely. If I could just leave with one thing, I want to say, everybody out there, whether it be negative or positive, your mind is one of the most powerful tools in your body. Get your mind right. Because to capitalize on what Tim said, sometimes you can go out here and things that happen to you, it's not your fault. But the mental is the number one breakdown of the immune system. Depression, anxiety, fear, it all breaks down your immune system because that is the stress on your mind. That will kill you faster than any sickness out here in this world. That is proven. So you need to, if whatever you do to meditate, to get your mind right, to relax your mind, to put your mind at ease, that is the most powerful tool that you can do to help you get through, especially what we're going through right now.
Dropping gems. Thanks a lot, Brian.
Thank you. I really appreciate being on this show.
And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that piece of extra content. It's exclusive to the YouTube channel and social media. It is not going to be aired in its entirety on the show. So some exclusive content there for you all to keep everyone engaged. And I was so excited and so pleasantly surprised to have Brian and his story featured on the show. And I hope it served as a healthy reminder that, hey, COVID-19 is very much still a real thing. It's still around, it's still present, but it's not a death sentence. And as long as we're careful and we're cautious and we're smart, we should be able to put ourselves in the best position to deal with things as they come up. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'll put the link and some additional information for all of Brian's things that everything that he's working on. I'll put that in the description of the show, so that way you can go and check him out. And who knows, maybe you'll hear me in the future on some of Brian's shows, and you will definitely hear from Brian again in the future on my show. Until next time, everybody, I'll keep talking if you'll listen. Peace out.